guys, just wanted to touch on something. Hey guys, just wanted to touch on something real quick regarding the conjugate method. I want to talk about what the conjugate method is and what it is not. The conjugate method is not a program, it is a system. It is a system in which one tries to raise at least two athletic qualities simultaneously. So a working definition is conjugate training is a training methodology in which you try to develop multiple athletic qualities, at least two, more than one, at a given time, typically in a finite specific training microcycle, training session, or training week. Westside Barbell uses a conjugate method, but not all conjugate methods are Westside Barbell. I would argue that unless you are training at Westside Barbell, you are not doing the Westside Barbell method. A couple of points of contention regarding conjugate training, i.e. who is it appropriate for and what is it best suited to. I would argue that conjugate training is most effective when used for training traditional non-barbell sport athletes. I don't think it's necessarily the best system for powerlifting and or weightlifting, although it can be. What it is not a concurrent training system. That is strictly speaking not true. Concurrent training refers to a process in which you try to develop both skills, i.e. practice, while developing a particular athletic quality. The most common example given of this would be the use of a weighted basketball, in which the person is trying to improve some athletic quality, maybe endurance or strength, to the extent you can improve strength with a weighted basketball, and the skill of handling the ball, perhaps shooting the ball. Note, this is almost always a bad idea. It compromises both the training and the practice. When it comes to athletic endeavors that are skill dependent, like most athletic endeavors, the most important facet of your training should actually be something other than training. It should be practice and or skill development. The lion's share of your time, if we're talking about a hierarchy of needs and priorities, then skill development and practice should occupy a place of primacy. That should be your primary focus. At some point, you can always get better with better practice, more practice, but at some point there comes a point where you need to improve various athletic qualities to complement your practice. And understand this, when it comes to strength training or any other type of athletic quality you want to improve, like endurance or whatever, using a barbell, sprints, jumps, all that stuff is incredibly general as it relates to your sport. And you should not have this idea in mind that for every pound you put on your squat, your bench press, or your clean, that you're going to catch another pass or make another shot. It does not work that way. As I said, skill development is the primary object of your focus. Why do I say that conjugate training is more appropriate for training non-barbell athletes than barbell athletes? Well, conjugate training, when you first start training, most of the adaptations you make are going to be neurological. They're not going to be muscular. When you first start training, any exposure to a movement or a load that you're not used to creates an adaptive response. So the minimum effective dose, the least you have to do to make progress, is incredibly low. And the maximum effective dose, the most you can do, is extremely high. As you go through your athletic career, those two things come closer together, and your minimum effective dose, once you become elite, and your maximum recoverable volume become almost equal, and it's very difficult to make progress. That's why conjugate training, where you're trying to improve multiple athletic qualities at one time, is better suited in barbell sports and also in athletic training for beginners, early and late stage intermediates. If you're a barbell athlete and you're advanced, the whole reason that Western periodization was created was to deal with the problems of minimum effective dose, maximum recoverable volume getting close together. So in Western periodization, typically you start out with higher volume, lower intensities, and as you get closer to a sporting event or a powerlifting meet or weightlifting meet, the intensity is ramped up, the loads, the weights you're handling, and the total amount of volume you're doing is reduced. And proponents of conjugate training, like Louis Simmons, will tell you that's backwards, because by the time you get to a contest, you've lost all your ability to withstand volume, and your endurance might be low, or you've lost your general physical preparedness as a base. So why not try to raise all of those things at once? And that's really, unless you're using performance enhancing drugs, which can artificially separate your minimum effective dose from your maximum recoverable volume, you can't be at your peak strength, your peak explosiveness, and your peak endurance all at the same time. So when you train to raise one athletic quality to its utmost, then invariably one of those other qualities is going to suffer. And that's just the way it is. Now, if your sport is basketball, football, or baseball, no one cares how much your 1 rep legal squat max is. No one cares what your bench press is. It should not matter to you. As a matter of fact, except for the purpose of making sure you're making progress with your training, I would discourage high school weight rooms from having record boards. Doesn't matter. Yeah, your best athletes are probably going to have higher, squat, bench, and deadlift, power clean, whatever. But the goal should just be to raise those athletic qualities. And if you do that appropriately and it's integrated with your skill development, you should not make your training look like practice. Don't make your practice look like training. Keep them separate. Build your athletic qualities through training. Develop skills through practice. And that's how you optimize performance. But essentially, that's what's been driving me crazy. Another thing is, conjugate training does not mean you have to have bands and chains and accommodating resistance and all that stuff. I would argue that it helps and it's fun because it adds variety to training, but you can certainly have a conjugate training program that does not include bands and chains. The conjugate method, as developed or kind of pieced together from Louis Simmons, was actually kind of a hodgepodge. He took things away from certain, like the Bulgarian system of max effort training, where they just did multiple 1 rep maximum clean and jerk, maximum snatches, maximum back squats, sometimes 8 or more times a day, with the Russian system that was more periodized and worked on different, had different phasic structures, and the Western periodization to some extent with the 3-week waves that he uses. He also included some of the explosive or dynamic training that Yuri Verkhoshansky developed through his research. But essentially, this is how you would want to set up a conjugate program for training an athlete. And I'm going to use a basketball player as an example because my kids play basketball. You would want to have roughly a system where you're training every other day or 3 to 4 times a week, aside from your practice. On the first day, you would want to have what I would refer to as a maximum effort lower body day, where you work up to a heavy double or triple in the squat or the deadlift. It does not have to be a full squat. It can be a box squat, because we don't care how much they squat. We just want them to get stronger. They can do deadlifts from the rack, as long as it's below the knee. They can do them from blocks, a couple inches off the ground. We're not trying to make them the best deadlifters in the world. We're trying to make them stronger. After you do that max effort movement, do some sort of volume to build muscle, to basically put some padding on these kids so that they can stay safe from injury. And a larger muscle has the propensity to be a stronger muscle, and to what extent you can call on all the muscle fibers to recruit at one time. The more muscle fibers you have, the larger percentage you can call upon at any given time, or the same percentage you can call upon, but because they're larger, you're actually recruiting more. So I would say start out with a box squat of 5 reps at 70%, 5 reps at 80%, and then maybe 3 reps at 90% plus. Then you may want to do some lunges. Maybe you do 50 walking lunges, maybe some leg curls or some back extensions or some reverse hype or something for the hamstrings, and get out of there. The next day, you want to have dynamic effort upper body day. That day, you're going to do something really fast for the upper body. It can be a push press, it can be a bench press where you do the same type number of sets that you would typically see in a program, but you want to do those explosively and as fast and ballistically as possible. So you'd maybe want to do 8 sets of 3 for 24 total reps, rather than the 5 sets of 5 that gets you 25. But you want to do those 3 reps explosively, as fast as humanly possible. After you've done that, have them do some kind of overhead pressing, maybe some dips, some push-ups. Get them out of there. On the days that you're not training, I would recommend that you do some sort of conditioning work, pulling a sled, pushing a sled. The next day would be dynamic effort lower body day. And on that day, just like the bench press, instead of working up the heavy on your squats like you do on your max effort day, you're going to do box squats against bands or chains, or just a lighter load, maybe 40%, 50%, for 8 sets of 3, moving the bar as fast as possible. Then in my opinion, you may want to have them do some depth jumps or some box jumps. Depth jumps or drop jumps are better for developing explosive speed, so I would encourage you to do no more than 15 touches of those, because they're so rough on the nervous system and they elicit a strong training effect. Then again, some lunges, something to build muscle. It doesn't really matter. That's just the assistance work is not all that important. Find what they're weak at. If they have weak hamstrings, work their hamstrings. If they have weak quads, work their quads. Then the next day is going to be a max effort bench. Maybe have them do a set of 5 at 70%, a set of 5 at 75, 80%, then a set of 3 at 90% plus. Then the same thing from the other day. Have them work on whatever they're weak at. On one of these days, on your dynamic day for upper body, you may want to include some sort of ballistic push-ups or medicine ball heaves or throws to develop explosiveness in the upper body. So you want to have a day that you're going for max effort, trying to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible for the lower body. Another day where you're trying to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible for the upper body. Third day where you're trying to develop speed and explosiveness in the lower body. And another day where you're trying to develop speed and explosiveness in the upper body. And I'm sorry I got to rambling on the training parameters, but in a nutshell, that's all you have to do to set up a conjugate training program. It does not have to be that way. It can be 3 days a week. It can be 2 days a week. What it should not do is interfere too much with practice, and you certainly don't want it interfering with performance. So don't put your max effort day a day or 2 before your game day. That's just dumb. But that's it in a nutshell. One day moving fast, one day moving heavier weights. Because they're heavier, they're gonna move slower. But that's conjugate training in a nutshell. Quit overthinking this. I would encourage you not to have a lot. You don't need to vary the exercise week to week like you see them doing at Westside Barbell. I would encourage you, in fact, to limit the number of exercises you have. Focus on one really tough movement per workout, because when you're training particularly large groups of kids, it's impossible. People get confused. It's just too much, and you don't need it. Like I said, we don't care how much they squat, bench, or deadlift. We care how good they play basketball. So By the way, if you don't have time to train, practice. If you have to sacrifice practice time to train, don't do it. Practice. Practice is far more important. But that's just my opinion. And most people can find time to practice. They just don't want to because they want to play the PlayStation or goof off in some other kind of way. Take 20 minutes away from the PlayStation, do some training. If you don't have weights, do some box jumps, do some sprints, do some drop jumps, do some plyometric push-ups. Go find a bar somewhere you can do some pull-ups. Get stronger, move faster, do something that creates body awareness. I don't care if it's skipping rope. I don't care if it's turning cartwheels. Just something so that the kids have spatial awareness and body awareness of where their bodies are in space. It's kind of sad, but you don't see kids playing the way they used to, so they don't learn how to land softly and absorb force, and they don't have good body awareness. So incidentally, as an add-on, if I were designing a perfect training program, I think one of the first things I would do, if my kids would actually do this, would be to sign them up for gymnastics. I don't think there's a better method for developing athletic balance and prowess and just awareness of your body in space as gymnastics. It's something I wish I would have done when I was younger. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Sorry to ramble on. If you have any questions, comment down in the comments and I will respond.